this diagram. Is it wrong? Well, we saw this diagram for the first time in the sampling video that's still doing quite well, so thank you for that. But there is quite a bit of concern over that particular diagram. Is the way in which I link the dots together incorrect? Is it true that, I know for sure that there is a sine wave that fits through these dots? All this and more in today's Random Wednesday episode. Hello and welcome back to another Random Wednesday episode. So let's talk about that particular diagram. I received a lot of comments telling me that the way in which I've joined everything together is incorrect. Instead, the claim is that you can smoothly join all the dots together. And well, as it turns out, yes, you can. If and only if you make certain assumptions. In this particular video, we'll talk about what those assumptions are and why that means we can actually smoothly draw the graph, as well as why we can't always make these assumptions. But yeah, before we jump in, let's clear the air. Yes, you can indeed smoothly join up, that graph if you make those assumptions that I've mentioned, but you don't always have to. Therefore, neither of us are wrong. That's the best that we can hope for. Let's move on to talk about what those assumptions are. To be explicit about the assumptions, there are two of them, and the first one needs to be put in place before the sampling even begins. Now, just to recap on the most important point of the previous video, if any signal is at a frequency equal to or greater than your sampling rate, it has a chance to become aliased. So there is a problem there. Therefore, the first assumption we can make, to prevent this problem from happening, apart from choosing a good sample rate, is to filter out frequencies that are too high. These frequencies are going to get destroyed anyway. Let's get rid of them before we perform our sampling. The filter we use for this is called a low pass filter. And essentially what we do is we reduce the frequencies that are too high so that there is no chance for them to get aliased and, mix into our signal. So low pass filtering is a technically optional step that happens before sampling. And our first assumption is that low pass filtering has indeed happened. Our second assumption then coming off the back of this is that there is some kind of reconstruction filter at play here. What this means is that right before our digital samples are converted to an analog signal, we stick this filter in between. This filter will do something smart to recover a better analog signal than just joining everything together. These are the two assumptions we need to have. Now, I would argue that our first assumption is the more important of the two. If we don't perform any kind of filtering, then we really have no idea what comes between two samples. It could be a straight line, or there could be a whole different wave in between these two samples that we did not capture. That's the nature of sampling. However, if we have performed a low-pass filter, we know that that stuff in between would have gotten discarded in the first place. We know for sure that there cannot be any complex stuff happening between these two points, these two samples. Because we have this assurance, we end up having only one sine wave that can actually fit through these sample points. That's why our first assumption is so powerful. If it holds true, we know for sure what the wave could look like. Of course, our first assumption is just knowledge on our part, right? We still need to do something to actually implement that. And that's where our second assumption, the reconstruction filter, actually comes in. This second filter can be very simple, it can be very primitive. And if that is the case, then we'll more or less just join our samples with straight lines. Of course, there are many other ways to do that, right? We can hold the level until the next sample comes along, creating a stair-step pattern. These can even be treated as discrete impulses, allowed to slowly fall off until the next sample comes along. You only need a capacitor to do that, so that's actually the cheapest and simplest way of, reproducing the analog signal. Of course, that's not going to sound great because you introduce a lot of weird frequencies into play. Of course, the really smart way of doing this would be to, do a little bit of math, figure out what is the best sine wave to fit into those samples, and then go ahead and draw out that sine wave, right? Essentially, we are filling in the missing data by using a sine wave, by fitting a sine wave to the samples. Of course, it doesn't have to be a sine wave, it can be some other kind of spline. But the idea is that we are not just blindly using straight lines to join everything together. Of course, bearing in mind that this does not invalidate anything we've said in a previous video. You still don't have information about what's going on between two samples. It's just that these assumptions help you figure out what's happening in between. In the most general case, if these assumptions are not in place, then you still cannot say that the construction is, well, definitely correct. Now, of course, the second thing to discuss then is, well, why are these assumptions, why are these not facts? Why are these not things we know for sure? In the context of audio, this tends to be how things are done. There is really no reason, not to low pass your input, and well, because we know that, there is really no reason not to reconstruct it nicely, right? Why not do that when you can? So in the context of audio, if you get any, relatively modern DAC, digital to analog converter, you will find that this rule is indeed being followed. However, that may not be the case if we talk about sampling in a general sense. Most of the examples that I'm about to share with you come from the spatial sampling kind of context. So photography and computer graphics, when we're sampling, well, space rather than time. In photography, for example, when you're using a camera, well, as it turns out, there is a filter within the camera body called an anti-aliasing filter. Well, if we were to low pass an image, we are essentially blurring it. And that is precisely what an anti-aliasing filter actually does. And yes, while having an anti-aliasing filter works to remove moire effects in pictures, well, what's probably going to happen is you're going to, scale it down or zoom out on it, and then the effect comes right back. The reason why this happens is that most scaling algorithms, the filtering that comes about with the scaling algorithms, are pretty lazy in terms of how they actually, sample the space. If an 8x8 grid of 64 pixels are going to map down to just 1 pixel, most filtering algorithms are not going to, go through all 64 pixels just to extract a good average value. Of course, doing this may prevent aliasing from happening. However, that's computationally expensive, and as a result, programs will usually sample just a small number of those pixels and then call it a day. So, in the context of photography, having an anti-aliasing filter is generally not enough, especially considering the context in which the pictures are going to be used. So, low-pass filtering isn't a given. The same applies for, say, computer graphics. Now, when you're doing 3D rendering, you're essentially sampling your 3D model, right? You have a 3D model, you have a 3D scene. Rendering is sending out little rays to sample essentially 1 dot worth of color for each pixel. Again, if you look at this basic model, then there isn't really anything you can filter, right? There is nothing to do any low-pass filtering on. In fact, the only filtering that's really possible is on the textures in the scene. These refer to image resources used, usually to add detail to whatever is in a 3D scene. In fact, the gamers among you will probably recognize certain filtering options within the graphics settings of the game, and isotropic filtering is one that comes to mind. All of these help mitigate some of the problems, but not all of them. Another common one is to oversample. So if I want an image that is 400 by 400, maybe I can sample an 800 by 800 pixel, right? And then scale it down, filter it down, blend things together. Now, doing things this way doesn't prevent aliasing. It's simply oversampling, right? It's like increasing the sample rate on your audio. So you're not getting rid of aliasing, you're just moving that bar to another place. You're just saying only frequencies that are even higher are going to get aliased, right? Aliasing can still happen. The reason why I'm sharing these with you is to let you know that, the assumptions that, we use in the context of audio to say that, the wave can be perfectly reproduced doesn't apply or may not apply to sampling in the most general sense. And that's why I stand behind the same graphics that I've drawn from the last time. If you don't make those assumptions, then joining things with straight lines is the best you can do. And even that is taking a little bit of liberty, because that still assumes that, we are trying to do something between the samples, when technically we have no information of what's happening between the samples. So hopefully this video clears things up. Hopefully, well, this convinces you that my original diagram isn't wrong, but neither is the saying that we can reconstruct a perfect wave, because you can if you follow your two assumptions. That's all there is for this particular Random Wednesday episode. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you very much for your support on the original sampling video. That's it, thank you. Until next time, you're watching 0612 TV with NERDfirst.net. Thank you very much for watching. If you like my work and are feeling generous, you can shoot me a one-time donation on PayPal or sign up for a recurring one on Patreon. Of course, you can simply like, comment, and subscribe. You know the deal. For more videos, links to my channel and a related playlist are on screen. Thank you for your support.